Hey, this is Amazon Jude coming to you from my war room in Wyoming, home of the one of the least populated states in America. But it doesn't mean we don't pay attention to what's going on. I'm out here doing my part to protect freedom, liberty, and justice for all.
Let me tell you a story about how America was almost destroyed by criminals. It's one that should shock anyone who reads it, but like any good thriller, it has a happy ending. The story is fully researched and has no affiliation with any political party, religion, or ideology, nor does it need it. May 4th, 2016. TV billionaire Donald J. Trump, against all the odds, wins the unofficial nomination as Republican candidate for the presidential election. Even happier at the news than Trump himself was none other than the Democratic National Committee and their candidate, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Their so-called Pied Piper strategy had worked. Clinton announced her candidacy on April 12, 2015, and became the presumptive Democratic nominee on June 7, 2016. From the moment she announced, Clinton and her team set themselves two objectives. 1. Destroy Bernie Sanders. 2. Weaken strong Republican rivals and strengthen weak ones. The DNC, Clinton, and their media proxies worked together to achieve both. And it worked. The Sanders campaign was destroyed, and the Republicans nominated Trump. On May 4th, 2016, Hillary Clinton would have been very pleased, and the Clinton versus Trump campaign had begun. At this point, Hillary Clinton would have been entirely certain that she was going to be POTUS 45, and that she could not lose. Donald Trump was ridiculed and dismissed as a foolish clown with no hope, but just 2 weeks later, May 22nd, 2016, something changed. It was the first time in the campaign that Donald Trump won a national poll against Hillary Clinton, 43.4 to 43.2. A tiny margin, but it sparked concern in the Clinton campaign and DNC. It sparked concern because it showed that their Pied Piper strategy may be falling apart. The outsider they had deliberately promoted, Donald J. Trump, the joke candidate, was taking the lead. Though even with this change in the air, Clinton and her team would never have doubted that victory over Trump was theirs. When it came to dealing with opponents, the MO of Clinton and her allies was already clear. Cheat, lie, and collude. Do whatever you have to do to destroy rivals. After all, they thought they were untouchable. Now there became a new objective: destroy Trump at all costs. A plan was coming together to paint Trump and his family as traitors. That plan was to be collusion with a foreign adversary to steal the election, and a narrative that would dominate mainstream media headlines for over a year. To date, no evidence has been made public to validate this claim, at least nothing that stands up to any reasonable scrutiny. But let's move to May 25th, 2016, a day that sent shockwaves through the Clinton campaign. The DNC discovered that all emails between January 15, 2015 and May 25, 2016 had been copied and removed from their servers. These damning emails were published by WikiLeaks on July 22, 2016, and they proved how the Clinton gang cheated Sanders. A tweet by Donald Trump Jr. disclosing his communication with WikiLeaks contained a link that seemed to suggest that Seth Rich, a Bernie bro, downloaded these onto a USB thumb drive and kept them as some form of insurance in an action similar to that of Edward Snowden, who did the same thing in 2013. After the damaging emails were released on WikiLeaks, the DNC made public a claim that they had been hacked rather than leaked. F.B.I. Director James Comey only offered to help and simply stood back when the DNC mysteriously refused. A new narrative had begun. Russian intelligence, under Putin, hacked the DNC. Soon after, Clinton allied mainstream media networks began pushing Trump's connections with Russia, and the Trump and Russia collusion story was born. It should be clear to anyone who is intellectually honest with themselves that the more likely scenario is that this story was invented to discredit the Trump campaign and distract the public from the damaging contents of the leaked DNC emails. The fix was in, but still it did not work. Trump's campaign rallies were full and passionate, and it appeared that this unlikely candidate was winning. Clinton, the DNC, Obama, and their proxies started to panic as they realized for the first time they had made a mistake in propping up their Pied Piper candidate. They went into overdrive. The Russia smear went viral. Unlawful and unethical actions began to take place. Clinton rigged the debates. Comey rigged the F.B.I. investigation by exonerating Clinton with the non-legal term extremely careless, even though the original wording of his closing statement was grossly negligent, a criminal offense. While under this investigation, Hillary Clinton's husband Bill held a controversial meeting with the head of the Justice Department, Attorney General Loretta Lynch, on an airport tarmac in Phoenix that the FBI tried to conceal. Attacks started on Trump and his family, nasty and personal, mostly all lies. Nothing worked. Trump was a phenomenon. They had never seen anyone like him. As the panic grew more severe, the DNC colluded with and paid a foreign intelligence contractor with ties to Russia to formulate a damaging dossier about Trump's sexual antics that was soon discredited. The Obama Justice Department used this questionable intelligence to authorize a FISA warrant to place Trump and members of his campaign under surveillance. Illegal spying starts on Trump, his campaign team, and his family. The illegality of these actions would have had no consequence, since Clinton and Obama had little doubt of a victory. November 8, 2016. Donald J. Trump was elected 45th President of the United States. Now, in full panic and realizing they had been compromised, the objective then was to prevent the inauguration. But President Donald Trump was inaugurated on January 20, 2017. Yet the Russia collusion story continued throughout 2017 in the hope that some truly damaging information would yet surface. They tried to destroy Trump and his family without success. The Russian collusion narrative is now understood on both sides as a lie, with mainstream media networks who run the story admitting off-camera that there was no substance to the claims at all, even as it continues to dominate their coverage. These people deliberately undermined international relations and committed crimes. They ripped up the rule of law. These are clearly crimes that will most certainly be revealed over the coming months, with the biggest shock in American history coming as famous and important political figures of the past 3 decades are indicted for a multitude of felonies. The human destruction and damage Clinton and her enablers have caused with her ambition and dishonesty has destroyed lives and careers. Innocent people have been smeared. Americans have been divided. Clinton, Obama, and co. almost destroyed America. They were organized criminals like the Chicago Mafia of Al Capone, but who made it right into the heart of power, allowing the country to fall into a state of lawlessness and division. Hillary Clinton knows full well what's coming down the line. Her guilt is spilling over the political divide, and even ardent supporters are starting to grow accustomed to the idea that maybe she was not the liberal feminist icon she presented herself to be. Left-leaning media outlets are beginning to introduce into the public eye the reality that Hillary and her enablers are going to be in trouble eventually. The coming months will be very difficult for Clinton's hardest supporters. They have been lied to the most. They have, in many cases, been sent totally insane. They are good people who care about others. They were manipulated and lied to and made to grow suspicious of their fellow Americans, directing their blame and confusion at Trump supporters, confused that the America they once knew was now filled with racists and homophobic bigots. It's time for justice so that the good people of America can once again come together and celebrate their differences as one people, united under a banner of freedom that was fought so hard for so many times in the past. Americans deserve no less for what these criminals have done. May God bless America.
Latest revelation on the quickly deepening FBI scandal is that FBI Director James Comey drafted Hillary Clinton's exoneration statement months before 17 prime witnesses, including Clinton herself, were even interviewed. Presidential attorney Jay Sekulow and former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer blasted Comey's lawless actions.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
And that was then FBI Director James Comey announcing back in July of 2016 that the Bureau would not recommend charges for Hillary Clinton. Now, a bombshell new discovery from 2 U.S. senators is casting doubt on whether Comey was taking the investigation into Clinton's misconduct seriously.
Appoint a second special counsel to investigate Mueller, Comey, Lynch, and the Clintons. He's got to. Nobody else can do it.
Why does he have to?
Because nobody else can do it. And
why do you need another investigator?
Because Comey, as we've now found out, he lied more than we even thought. We know that Mueller was his confidant by law. Mueller is disqualified from investigating Comey. We have got to have a second special prosecutor to investigate, and Jeff Sessions recused himself from anything touching Russia. Well, the Clintons touched Russia, so only the president is going to be able to make that appointment. He's got to do that for the sake of the country.
But if he does that, that's going to be a bigger story. It's going to be like he's trying to get rid of Mueller.
It would have been better if he could have fired Mueller. But the very day Comey testified that there is no collusion between Trump and the Russians, that was a day that Mueller realized, oh my gosh, I don't have a basis for being here. So he leaked out that very day, I'm now investigating Trump for obstruction, just so that Trump couldn't fire him.
On October 25th, Trump's surrogate Rudy Giuliani appeared on Fox News and bragged that the Trump campaign had, quote, a surprise or two you're going to hear about in the next few days. I'm talking about some pretty big surprises, and I do think that all of these revelations about Hillary Clinton finally are beginning to have an impact. 3 days later, Director Comey announced that the FBI would be reopening its investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. On November 4, when asked whether he had heard about the FBI's reopening of the email investigation, Giuliani said, "Did I hear about it? You're darn right I heard about it." He went on to say, "I'd expected this for the last, honestly, to tell you the truth, I thought it was going to be 3 or 4 weeks ago." Were you able to determine how Mr. Giuliani received this information?
Senator, I'm not going to speak to any of the investigative steps we may or may not have taken for the very reasons we describe in here about what's appropriate to do in terms of following policy.
Well, what actions, if any, have been taken against the individuals responsible for disclosing this information to Mr. Giuliani?
As we note in the report, our investigative work's still ongoing. We put this in here so that the readers and the public could see our concerns about the number of contacts with the media and what was going on systemically, but I'm not in a position at this point to speak to any investigative outcomes.
How did you interpret that, and what did you believe he wanted you to do?
I interpret that as he was frustrated that the Russia investigation was taking up so much time and energy. I think he meant of the executive branch, but in the public square in general, and it was making it difficult for him to focus on other priorities of his. But what he asked me was actually narrower than that. So I think what he meant by the cloud, and again, I could be wrong, but what I think he meant by the cloud was the entire investigation is taking up oxygen and making it hard for me to focus on the things I want to focus on.
Start tonight with breaking news. There is a second memo exposing deep state corruption. Now, Senators Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham have released a heavily redacted yet very revealing copy of their criminal referral against Christopher Steele. Now, these revelations are beyond stunning and continue to prove the Clinton campaign and the Obama administration were working together to target the Trump campaign. Here are the findings from this new memo. This is just released today, not the old memo on Friday. We got to keep up here. Now, Senators Grassley and Graham write this, that while working on a second dossier, Steele was being fed information from the Obama State Department and from Clinton allies. The memo then reads and goes on, quote, one memorandum by Mr. Steele that was not published by BuzzFeed is dated October 19, 2016. The report alleges redacted, as well as redacted. Mr. Steele's memorandum states that his company received this report from redacted U.S. State Department, and that the report was the second in a series, and that the report was information that came from a foreign subsource who is in touch with a contact of redacted, a friend of the Clintons who passed it to redacted. And it's troubling enough that the Clinton campaign funded Mr. Steele's work, but that these Clinton associates were contemporaneously feeding Mr. Steele's allegations. It raises huge additional concerns about his credibility.
Are you still seeking a one-week delay in order to testify?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ladies and gentlemen, seeking the truth is the obligation of this committee. I can see no point in going further. I have no expectation that Ms. Lerner will cooperate with this committee, and therefore we stand adjourned. Chairman, I have a statement. I have a procedural question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question. Mr. Chairman, you cannot run a committee like this. You just cannot do this. We're better than that as a country. We're better than that as a committee. I have asked for a few minutes to ask. What's the big deal? May I ask my question? May I state my statement?
You're all free to leave. We've adjourned, but the gentleman may ask his question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have one procedural question. And it goes to trying to help you get the information, by the way, that you just asked.
What is your question?
Let me say what I have to say. I've listened to you for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let me say what I have to say. Chairman, I have one procedural question.
Ms. Lerner, you're released. You may.
But first, I would like to use my time to make some brief points. For the past year, the central Republican accusation in this investigation,
we're adjourned.
Close it down. Collusion directed by...
On the left-hand side of your screen, let me just tell our viewers what you're seeing there. Darrell Issa is standing, and he says, we're adjourned. And Elijah Cummings, who's the ranking Democrat, says, no, we're not.
The United States of America. I am tired of it.
Well,
we have members over here.
Memo is on Donald Trump's desk. Adam Schiff is weeping as the memo's release is imminent. Moments ago, the House Intelligence Committee convened to vote on whether or not the FISA abuse memo should be released to the public. Well, they voted, and the Democrat Adam Schiff was not pleased. The president now has 5 days to sign off on the release to the public, and immediately following the vote, Schiff ran to the cameras and revealed something even more horrific to the swamp monsters who are watching. Take a look.
We had votes today to politicize the intelligence process, to prohibit the FBI and the Department of Justice from expressing their concerns to our committee and to the House, and to selectively release to the public only the majority's distorted memo without the full facts. A very sad day, I think, in the history of this committee. As I said to my committee colleagues during this hearing, sadly, we can fully expect that the President of the United States will not put the national interest over his own personal interest.
If I wanted America to fail, to follow, not lead, to suffer, not prosper, to despair, not dream, I'd start with energy. I'd cut off America's supply of cheap, abundant energy. I couldn't take it by force, so I'd make Americans feel guilty about using the energy that heats their homes, fuels their cars, runs their businesses, and powers their economy. I'd make cheap energy expensive, so that expensive energy would seem cheap. I would empower unelected bureaucrats to all but outlaw America's most abundant sources of energy. After banning its use in America, I'd make it illegal for American companies to ship it overseas. If I wanted America to fail, I'd use their schools to teach one generation of Americans that their factories and their cars will cause a new ice age, and I'd muster a straight face so I could teach the next generation that they're causing global warming. When it's cold out, I call it climate change instead. I'd imply that America's cities and factories could run on wind power and wishes. I'd teach children how to ignore the hypocrisy of condemning logging, mining, and farming while having roofs over their heads, heat in their homes, and food on their tables. I would never teach children that the free market is the only force in human history to uplift the poor, establish the middle class, and create lasting prosperity. Instead, I demonize prosperity itself, so they will not miss what they will never have. If I wanted America to fail, I would create countless new regulations and seldom cancel old ones that would be so complicated that only bureaucrats, lawyers, and lobbyists could understand them. That way small businesses with big ideas wouldn't stand a chance. And I would never have to worry about another Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, or Steve Jobs. I would ridicule as flat earthers those who urge them to lower energy costs by increasing supply. And when the evangelists of common sense try to remind people about the laws of supply and demand, I'd enlist the sympathetic media to drown them out. If I wanted America to fail, I would empower unaccountable bureaucracy seated in a distant capital to bully Americans out of their dreams and their property rights. I'd send federal agents to raid guitar factories for using the wrong kind of wood. I'd force homeowners to tear down their own homes built on their own land. I'd make it almost impossible for farmers to farm, miners to mine, loggers to log, and builders to build. Because I don't believe in free markets, I'd invent false ones. I'd devise fictitious products like carbon credits and trade them in imaginary markets. I'd convince people that this would create jobs and be good for the economy. If I wanted America to fail, for every concern I'd invent a crisis, and for every crisis I'd invent a cause, like shutting down entire industries and killing tens of thousands of jobs in the name of saving spotted owls. And when everyone learned the stunning irony that the owls were victims of their larger cousins and not people, it would already be decades too late. If I wanted America to fail, I'd make it easier to stop commerce than to start it, easier to kill jobs than create them, more fashionable to resent success than to seek it. When industries seek to create jobs, I'd file lawsuits to stop them, and then I'd make taxpayers pay for my lawyers. If I wanted America to fail, I would transform the environmental agenda from a document of conservation to an economic suicide pact. I would concede entire industries to our economic rivals by imposing regulations that cost trillions. I would celebrate those who preach environmental austerity in public while indulging a lavish lifestyle in private. I convince Americans that Europe has it right and that America has it wrong. If I wanted America to fail, I would prey on the goodness and the decency of ordinary Americans. I would only need to convince them that all of this is for the greater good. If I wanted America to fail, I suppose I wouldn't change a thing.
He had been contacted directed by a man using an alias, as it turns out, Henry Greenberg, who had information that he said would be of great value to the Trump campaign. Every congresswoman would take the call if they got that call. Oh, we got op research on your opponent. I took the meeting, and Henry Greenberg turns out to be an FBI informant of Russian descent who's been admitted to the country 9 times on informant visas, who is a violent felon who otherwise could not be in the country. And then he tries to entrap me, but he gives away the game when he says he wants $2 million for negative information on Hillary. When I tell him I don't have $2 million, he says it's not your money I want, it's Donald Trump's money.
Simply said is the facts, which are that based on uniform intelligence assessments, the Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC.
The forces that were at work in 2016 were unlike anything that I've ever seen or read about. It was a perfect storm. But I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off. Within an hour or two of the Hollywood Access tape being made public, the Russian theft of John Podesta's emails hit WikiLeaks. What a coincidence. So, I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. There have been some studies done since the election that if you look, let's pick Facebook, if you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages. They were connected to the bots that are just out of control. We see now this new information about Trump's Twitter account being populated by millions of bots.
Repeating the Hillary Clinton talking point that the reason why she lost is because James Comey said that they found some new material on Anthony Weiner's laptop and they had something more to investigate, and that derailed Hillary's momentum and cost her the election. Just keep doing what you're doing, Democrats. You are ruining your party's reputation better than we could have ever imagined. Meanwhile, YouTube's trying to ruin my career, so I'm going to be launching a brand new shirt every...
For history does not long entrust the care of freedom to the weak or the timid.
Nations may rise, fall, but an idea lives on.
Lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
History hasn't been easy on America. We've waged war in foreign fields and secured the blessings of liberty. But history isn't simply the story of our time. It's also the story of our struggles. And we are no strangers to hardship. Each generation of Americans is tested, and we're entering a time of tribulation, disappearing jobs, disappointing politics. But beyond that lies the second American century, a new golden age. Our generation is being called not to win a revolution, but to preserve one, to recall the source of the blessings of liberty before liberty is squandered by those who do not understand that it can be lost forever. We are being called to declare that the principles of our founders are timeless, not temporary. To decide that freedom isn't always comfortable or convenient, but it is always necessary, whether it is in the public space or the marketplace. We are being called to remember simply who we are. When times are toughest, our truest character is revealed. Times are tough, and sometimes our politics can seem hopeless. So what do? We do what we have always done, what we're best at.
I fight for freedom.
For our republic. For my family.
For the free market.
I fight. I fight.
I fight.
We fight.
Deposition 102, and I don't know if we have that in our document. This is the one that has Ms. Herwig on it, and the email says suggested edits from me, that is from Carolyn Porcorny, who was in the Office of Government Affairs, OAG's Office of Attorney General, Paige being Paige Herwig, and Office of Legislative Affairs. So they've all reviewed it. and they made changes. Now, here's what's interesting about this document, and I'm showing up for our cameras so you all can see it, but our radio audience, let me tell you what's there. They black out what they edited. But on that email, and this is what we now know, was this lawyer who's now with the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, what is the oversight then that's going on with the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Well, this is the look behind the scenes that people need to understand, Jay, because the next thing that the committee would do was actually call to either testify in open hearing or maybe do an interview behind the scenes with the people that made edits of the talking points. So you would expect someone like Paige Herwig to be one of the very first people that they called in to say what really happened behind the scenes, what were you driving for, what were the talking points. We understand that they were redacted, they have, maybe exceptions, but we have clearance to see those. They would want to talk to Paige Herwig. Well, do you think Paige Herwig, Jay, is going to invite Paige Herwig to come and either testify or do an interview behind the scenes? I don't think so. So, honestly, the natural course of these investigations is not possible here because they're the same people involved.
Because you could not make this stuff up. I mean, we were looking at the document, so let me get it a step further for everybody. So then there's an email at 151. It's document number 105, again, like it was in a deposition, so we have the actual document. And Logan, this one says, thanks, Melanie. We'll show this to the AG now. Can you also prepare a couple of TPs for the press avail? TPs being talking points.
That's right. As we all know, what kind of unraveled after this was a lot of, we talked about our grandkids, and we talked about a lot of those things that came up that a lot of people just laughed at because even if it was true, it was still a power play. And it was still something that was not appropriate. Even let's put that on the even the fact of if everything she said was true, it still was not an appropriate action that took place.
So I look at that and the press availed. So at that point, Harry, it becomes very clear here that they know, and that's why we're giving you some real detail on this. Let me play Loretta Lynch's sound on this because this is what she said.
Well, I did see the president at the Phoenix airport the other night. As I was landing, he was headed out. He did come over and say hello and speak to my husband and myself and talk about his grandchildren and his travels and things like that. So that was the extent of that. And no discussions were held in any cases or anything of that. And he didn't raise anything about that either.
They talked for an hour. I mean, an hour on the tarmac. And she said at one point she didn't know what to do because the president had a heart condition and she didn't want him to stay outside in the heat. I mean, what you could have said is, Mr. President, we're interviewing your wife, this former Secretary of State, on Saturday. It's not appropriate for us to meet. That would have been the response. And by the way, did she recuse herself from this? The answer to that is no, she did not. She said, well, I'll look what my career bureaucrats say. Here's what's interesting, of course. This is jumping ahead a lot, but we'll talk about this in a little bit. James Comey uses this as the basis upon which he goes public on this whole Hillary Clinton matter back in July of last year. So let's not forget any of this. So that's why context is very, very important. I'm taking you to 158. And at 158, it's interesting because now we've got the Office of Deputy Attorney General involved, the Office of the Attorney General involved. We have the Office of Public Affairs involved. And the content is others are requesting that edit as well, but I'm happy to discuss. What is that edit? We don't know that edit. I think they just had, there it is. So they redacted out that edit. Let me tell you what we're doing. We're going back to court to get that document. Because, Harry, this is what they did. They released what was going on, but they sure don't want to show what that edit is.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that the Senate Judiciary Committee should do is it should call first Paige Herwig as a witness and have her testify under oath and then excuse her from drafting questions from Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Congressman, you're in Judiciary. How would you assess right now your satisfaction with the cooperation you are getting from the DOJ to produce documents surrounding Russia collusion and all these investigations right now?
Yeah, I'd say that it's poor to quite poor. We've been asking for documents that predate July 31st. The Department of Justice initially said that July 31st was when they opened up on Papadopoulos and began this investigation into the Trump campaign's potential collusion with Russia. I asked Rod Rosenstein in open hearing whether or not there were any investigative actions that occurred before July 31st, and he would not answer that question. We've been asking for documents from before July 31st, and we haven't gotten them. And so that really undermines the position the Department of Justice has previously taken when now they've gone squirrely on the responses and on the documents.
I want to talk to you right now, and I want to see if we can all perhaps join forces in recalibrating the coalition and put some things into perspective. And I think it's important that we do it every now and then, just to stop and not get caught up in because it's true. I'll get to the bad parts in a moment, don't worry. But his strong points are terrific. He doesn't care what anybody says. He has a nonchalance about it. He makes mistakes. He understands. This is a guy who said, I think I'm going to go, and I'm going to go into TV. And they said, you can't go into TV. Okay, you're a good guest, but you're the #1 show for I don't know how long. He does that. He's a billionaire. He runs for office one time. One time. Runs for office. County commission? Nope. City council? Dane Kyer. School board? Not even in the ballpark. President. He runs for president and wins. And not only wins, beats 16 of the best, brightest, most moneyed Republicans you can imagine. Destroys Hillary Clinton. I mean, doesn't even. I mean, it was like when Grant took Vicksburg. It was just. I mean, it was like
smoke out.
Shite through a goose. It was, my God, it was brutal. Scorched earth, whatever you want to call it. So he knows what he's doing. Next. This is going to be difficult. And this is tough. But I want you to understand something. What you hear in the media, and I know you don't. I know you say you don't listen to them. I know.
But you do.
I know you say, I don't watch CNN. Good. You know what they're saying, but just disregard it.
Yeah.
Imagine you have a very troubled child, a child who's going through some hard times, and I want you to imagine how you as a parent would talk to your child. Say, okay, all right, honey, now sit down and let's have something to eat. I don't want to hate you. Okay, I know you're upset. Now sit down and let's have something to eat. Time to go to bed. Don't. Good night. That's the way you treat CNN. Okay, Wolf, I understand. Yes, Wolf, I understand. Treason, you want to, and remember this trick. Repeat what people are saying like you're a psychiatrist at a mental hospital. Think like a psychiatrist would talk to somebody on the ward. So Trump is a traitor, and you want to charge him with treason, which of course is the death penalty. Okay, fine. And you're going to waive the constitutional provision regarding treason, regarding, what is it, 2 witnesses, 3 witnesses, whatever. It's been a while since I've read this. Okay. Now, here's a cookie, and let's go to bed. Just don't engage them. If you have friends of yours, family members, degenerate, lost friends who are just beside themselves over your confidence, love, fealty, respect, preference of the president, and if you're one of those QAnon lunatics, as they think of us, just remember what I'm saying. You talk to them like a psychiatrist says, I see. And you think that QAnon is a LARP. Okay. All right. Now, you want to go outside? You want to just unruffle. Nothing. You respect them? I see.
Best advice you could ever give.
All the unregistered foreign agents in this country, but the law should apply to everybody, not just people who support a president Washington despises. Joe DeGenova has been in Washington a long time. He's a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and he joins us tonight. So, Joe, as we said last night, I want to restate now, we spoke to 2 separate sources who told us, who were close to this question, that Tony Podesta, former head of the Podesta Group, the biggest Democratic lobbying firm in Washington, had been offered immunity by the Mueller investigation in exchange for testifying against Paul Manafort. If that is true, what does it mean?
It means that the Mueller investigation has now reached a level of debasement akin to the 9th level of hell in Dante's Inferno. It also means that if you're a Democrat, you get a pass. There are 2 standards of justice in this town being carried out by the Department of Justice under both administrations and the FBI under both administrations. The FBI and the DOJ under Obama gave Hillary Clinton a pass. They ignored criminal violations and found her innocent when in fact she had violated the law. They immunized her lawyers. They immunized her staff. They immunized the people who bleached her computer. All of them were Democrats. And now in the prosecution of Paul Manafort, who do they immunize first? The person who broke the law, just like allegedly Paul Manafort did, helped the Russians, helped some phony Ukrainians, and what does Bob Mueller do first? He immunizes a guilty Democrat.
So give us some perspective on the FARA law, Foreign Agent Registration Act of 1938. It's been around a long time. In 50 years, between 1966 and 2016, 7 people were prosecuted under it. 7 in 50 years. In the past year, we've had 3 people prosecuted under it, all of them connected to Donald Trump. Does this seem like selective enforcement of the law to you?
Well, there's no doubt that it does. And even though it technically is within the power of a prosecutor to make these types of decisions, what you are seeing rolled out now by Robert Mueller, the esteemed Mr. Mueller, is the degradation of the federal criminal law enforcement process. And you can thank Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who set up this phony investigation, and Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, who has never once put on his big boy pants and is allowing this to happen. This is an embarrassment to federal law enforcement. Every FBI agent, every DOJ lawyer who's worth his or her salt knows that what you are watching is a debasement of federal law enforcement. It ought to be an embarrassment to somebody like Mueller, but the truth is Mueller has stayed too long at the fair.
Joe DeGenova, former federal prosecutor.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.